figure out if a function is linear based on its equation, what we want to look for is we want to see if we can write the equation in slope-intercept form, meaning y equals mx plus b. In other words, we want to just make sure there's nothing weird going on. No powers of x, no x's in the bottom of fractions, no absolute value bars, nothing bizarre. I'll show you a way to tell by graphing after this part of the video is done. I'll show you my calculator, as well as a cool calculator trick for doing this second part of the question. So taking a look at this first function, g of x, I can see that right away there's a problem. There's an x squared in there. So what that's going to tell me is this first function is not linear. We'll take a look at the graph momentarily and see what it looks like on a graph, but it's not linear, it's not going to make a straight line. The other equation, on the other hand, does fit into slope-intercept form. It's just a number times x plus b. The only exponent there is, I guess, x to the first power. So this one is linear. It would make a line when we graphed it, and I'll show you how to graph on the calculator momentarily. So that's the first part of the problem. The second part of this was we want to see, oops, hang on one second. There we go, I brought my picture back. The next thing we want to do is we want to do this part of the problem. Find g of x. Really, that's just a fancy way of the problem telling you to evaluate the function. And specifically what they're telling you is that x is equal to -4. So we want to plug in -4 for all the x values, or all the x's, and x variables, and solve and simplify and see what's left over. So let me go ahead and start over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace my x with -4. I'm going to ignore this part of the problem for right now, and I'll come back and tell you why momentarily. So I'm going to have a negative, and then in parentheses a -4, that's the value I subbed in for x, squared, minus 2 times -4, and then plus 7. So that's the problem I want to work out. Now I cannot do the two negatives right here, do not cancel out. A lot of people make that mistake. Instead, order of operations says start with this, start with the exponent. So -4 times itself is positive 16, but then since there's that negative in front, this whole beginning term becomes just a negative 16. Be careful with that. Next up is -2 times -4, so that's a positive 8, and then plus 7. So negative 16 and 8 get me a -8 plus 7. I end up with a -1 when I'm all done. Now that's actually my answer, and I would probably just do that and stop there. But let me show you technically what's going on here, and I'll show you the mistake people make and why I skipped that over. So I had said that we're going to plug in -4 for x. Well, that includes all x's, including that one over there. So technically I'm writing g of -4 in front of all these equal signs. So I end up with a final answer technically of g of -4 is equal to -1. Well, that's technically the answer, but again, if you just give me -1, I'm fine with that. The reason I say that is because a lot of people, the mistake they make, and you can probably see it, you might be thinking it right now too, is if they do this and get g of -4, they start to think that g is a variable, and then they go ahead and divide both sides by -4. And that's so wrong. Please don't do that. -1 is your answer. If this g of -4 stuff is going to mess you up, then don't do that. But technically that's my answer, although -1 is just fine. Let's go ahead and evaluate the other side for g of -4, and I'll show you an easy way to do this on your calculator to check it and to see whether it's linear or not. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, the ever so scary putting the g of -4 in the problem, just to show you that, you know, it's fine to do it that way. It's technically the right way. I just am getting... A lot of people get confused when they do it that way. So g of -4 would equal -20, and then add an 8 onto that. So my technical answer is g of -4 is equal to -12 once I simplify. If you just have -12, that's a-okay with me. The only reason we like this notation is it shows us our input and our output, you know, very easily. We see -4 was our input, our domain, -12 was our output, our range, our y value. So that's the end of this part. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my calculator and show you how I'm going to enter these in my calculator, and then use the table to check if I had evaluated correctly. Alright, so I showed you how to tell whether an equation represented a linear function or not, something that would be a line, just based on the equation. Here's how you can use your graph to do it. So let's press y equals. Let's actually go ahead and graph what we need to take a look at. So the first thing that we were examining was this function that was negative. Make sure there's a negative sign, not the minus sign, subtraction sign. So -x squared minus 2x. We already know that this one was not linear based on what we talked about a moment ago. But let's go ahead and take a look at what the graph looks like. So there's my equation typed in. Go ahead and hit graph. And you can see that, yeah, no way is that going to be a line. That's something called a parabola, but it's not linear. I was going to show you another trick as well. Remember, we were asked to evaluate the function, figure out what g of -4 was. We did it by hand, but here's how you can use your table to answer the same question. So press second graph to access your table, and then you'll see all these x values. Well, we were asked to use an x value of -4, so watch this. Use your arrow, scroll up to -4, and read your y value. Look at that. There's our y value. Without doing any work, it's a great way to check your answer to make sure you were right. We plugged in -4, we got -1 out as an answer. And we can do the same thing for the second equation. So I pressed y equals, I'm going to clear out what I just typed in. I'll type in just to test whether it's a line or not, even though we know it is, because of that previous conversation. 5x plus 8, I'll hit graph and take a look, and voila, there's my line. So it is linear. If I want to evaluate this without doing it by hand, I can check my table, press second graph, again look up -4, and there's our answer, -12.